Good morning, good morning. And today is the day after Passover. It has a special status in Torah. It's called Isu Chag. It's a day after a holiday, after a festival. It's called Isu Chag. And I wanted to start by reading from the Hayom Yom, which is a collection by the Lubavitcher Rebbe of sayings of his father-in-law, the Rabbi Yosef Yitzhak, that relates to today. So it's divided into little segments for each day of the year. And for this day, which is the 23rd of Nisan, which is Isu Chag, it's also the 8th day of the Omer. So we count from Passover, from the second night of Passover until Shavuos, which is the time of the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. We count 49 days. And today is the 8th day. So yesterday was the last day of Passover, and it's called Achan Shel Pesach, and Pesach is the Hebrew for Passover. And on that day, on yesterday, we read the Haftarah from after the Torah reading, we read a portion from the book of Isaiah, which refers to and describes the coming of Mashiach. And one of the phrases there is that the world is going to be filled with the knowledge of the Lord, like the earth, like the water, like the ocean is filled with water. And also talks about how it describes Mashiach and the special spirit of God's wisdom that's going to rest in Mashiach, and talks about how the whole world is going to be transformed to know God. So we're coming off this special experience yesterday, and we make something called the Mashiach Suda, and we make a special meal, just wine and matzah, to really bring down into the world the coming of Mashiach. So with all that in mind, the Rabbi writes over here, the presence of Mashiach is revealed on Achan Shel Pesach. The presence of the Messiah is revealed on the last day of Passover. And this revelation has relevance to all of Israel, all of Israel. Because Pesach is medalig. Passover means to jump, to go over. God Almighty skipped over the houses of the Jewish people, and during the plague of the firstborn. So Pesach is skipping over rather than as opposed to orderly progress. So you have life, you could go through things, one thing after the other. You have to get all the steps in order. You have to get all your, like they say in English, there's an expression, you have to get all your ducks in a row. And that is something that's different than Pesach. Pesach is the concept of jumping over. You could jump from one level to the next without having to go through all the steps. So Pesach that's one concept of Passover, is skipping over. And the other is Leil Shemurim, because while God was jumping over the houses of the Jewish people, he was also protecting the Jewish people. So that's called the protected night. Leil means night, Shemurim means protected. So in general, the mood of Pesach, of Passover, is one of liberty. Then Pesach ends, and we find ourselves tumbling headlong into the outside world. Now we're going to go back to work. We have all the things that we need to take care of, while eagerly anticipating Mashiach, but we don't see in the world yet all the full manifestation of Mashiach. So this is where Mashiach's presence this is where Mashiach's revealed presence comes into play, imbuing us with a powerful resoluteness that enables us to maintain ourselves in the world. Meaning to say that right now, this is where the revelation of Mashiach takes effect. We think that when we have a very special experience, yesterday we have the revelation of the light of Mashiach, we have the Mashiach Suda, we have the Haftarah that's talking about Mashiach. I think that's then, and then now here we are, and we don't have that anymore. So the Rebbe is correcting our misperception. No, on the contrary, everything that we gained yesterday is being brought now into actual action in the world. We are going to experience the revelation of the light of Mashiach and Mashiach's presence now in the things that we're going to do each day today and each day henceforth. So I wanted to start with that note because we have to realize the significance. It's not every day is not just another day. Every day has additional benefit, additional strength, additional light, additional revelation, and we want to make sure that we are in tune with that we are aware of that, and we are making ourselves available to that also and bringing that into our lives. Any questions? Okay. So pull up over here. Okay, so we're discussing Rabbi Steif's summarizing here from the Rambam that everyone accepts upon themselves the Torah, the Sheva Mitzos Bnai Noach that are in the Torah and is careful to do them. He's in paragraph 9. We've already gone through this. We're going to go through it again today. And there's one of the Chassidic Umas Elam, and he has a portion in the world to come. And this is as long as he takes them upon himself and does them because it was commanded, because he was commanded in them by God Almighty in the Torah. And it was made known to us by through Moses, our teacher, before that Bnei Noach was commanded in them. But if he does them just because of makes sense, this is not a ger teshuv, a resident alien in Israel, and he's not from the Hasidic Umas Elam from Lo Mechachmechem. Now, and he's not from one of the Hasidic Umas Elam, and he's not from one of the wise ones. Now, we've been discussing in the last 2 weeks, we were discussing some of the concepts of eternity and how eternity is the number one rule of all living things, that they want, every living thing's striving for eternity, and it's striving for eternity in this physical world through reproducing, through the mitzvah, the commandment to be of puruvu, which we see that God Almighty also commanded the trees and commanded the living things and the animals and the fish of the sea and the birds of the sky to be fruitful and multiply, and he commanded that to human beings. That's on a physical level of eternity, and there's the spiritual level of eternity. Now, we started to learn some of the things and explore some of the ideas that come from this understanding of eternity. And if you recall, we came up with this whiteboard over here that we shared, in which we talked about how the eternity is as we can see from this, what we just learned from Rabbi Steif, quoting from the Rambam, that eternity is the gift. The spiritual eternity is a gift that comes from being in accord with God Almighty, the giver, the real eternal one. When we're in accordance with the giver of life, when a non-Jew is going to understand the source of the commandments, and he's going to, and she's going to fulfill those commandments because God Almighty is the giver of those commandments, then that person has a place in the world to come. That's a guaranteed promise. So we see that that's fulfilling this striving for eternity, because we as human beings are conscious, are aware that there's something more than just the physical and the chemical. And therefore we understand that life is composed of both a physical life and a spiritual life, and they come together, and that creates a living thing. And that when the living force is separated from the physical entity, that's the living being. In the case of a human being, that spiritual part, that life force, is able to continue, and that's the continuing of spiritual eternity. So we discussed that if there's when a person is doing something that's pro-eternity, which is advancing his eternity, both physical and spiritual, then the innate divine feeling a person is going to feel is a feeling of pride. And if he's doing something that's against his eternity, then he's going to feel a feeling of shame. And this is something that's an innate feeling. And we also discussed the Ramam Mefano that talks about how it's built into each human being. Each human being doesn't want to be involved in things that are going against his creator. Every human being wants to be in accordance with his creator. We discussed, however, that Amalek, which seeks to fight against God Almighty, then it reverses and the that tries to twist around people's thinking to promote the idea of feeling shameful if a person is doing things that are pro-eternity, and tries to twist people around into promoting pride if they're doing something that's anti-eternity. Now, I wanted to just discuss a little bit this concept of the shame, because we know that Amalek, its whole existence is an existence of shame. And it's not something that can be resolved by, trying to placate Amalek and trying to make Amalek feel better. If you were to come to a person over here, a typical person, even a person that's involved in all kinds of anti-eternity things, but if you're able to speak to him and show him that he can move from that experience of anti-eternity and shame, then he will be able to move into pro-eternity thinking and pro-eternity actions very simply, because that's who he really is. And then he will feel the pride of being alive and the pride of being in accordance with God Almighty's will. That's something that's just very, very simple. It's not complicated, because when you're talking to another human being, you're talking to somebody who is innately aware of this and innately knows that he's alive, innately knows what it means to be alive, and just needs to be brought that needs to be brought to the forefront of his awareness, the forefront of his consciousness. And even if that even applies to a person who has been fallen under the psychological manipulation of Amalek. So he's been taught by Amalek to feel shame from his eternity actions. So and then he's been taught to be proud of his anti-eternity actions. His mind has been played with, and his heart has been played with. So you could come to a person and you could just talk to him lovingly, heart to heart, and that person will see how his whole consciousness has been inverted by the tricks of Amalek, and you can influence a person. But we also have to understand something over here, that underlying this false pride over here that Amalek is promoting is a breeding of hatred. And that's because this person here senses unresolved shame. Okay, so here, if a person is alive, a living person, basically he might be into the worst things. He could have just done a terrible thing. He could have killed someone, God forbid, or he could have stolen, or he could have worshipped an idol, or done something that was immoral in a relationship way. And he's going to feel the shame, and then he's going to resolve the shame by moving back into from the anti-eternity to the pro-eternity actions. So he'll do tshuva. He'll realize he needs to return the thing that he stole. He needs to make amends for what he did, and he will resolve the shame, will be resolved in a healthy way by moving back into the pro-eternity life. But if a person is being told to be proud of his anti-eternity, his mind is being played with, to say, oh, no, don't feel shame over your anti-eternity actions. You should feel pride. The problem is, superficially, he's going to, say he's proud, but underlying it is the shame still exists. He cannot get rid of the shame, no matter how much he goes around trying to convince himself and convince others that he's proud of his anti-eternity action. He's still going to feel this underlying shame. And the shame, however, will not have the opportunity to resolve itself, because he's going to be, Amalek is pushing him to stay down here in this area, saying, no, don't feel shame, feel proud. Don't resolve your shame by saying, okay, that was not such a good idea. I don't think that was a good idea. I think that instead I'm going to go back to here. Amalek is saying, stay over here, and feel proud about it. So the end result is the person has unresolved shame. Now he's going to hate himself. When a person can't resolve his shame, the hatred he starts to hate himself. On one hand, superficially, he's like proclaiming that he is doing, good stuff, and he's going to get very, very, how do you say it? He's going to get very haughty about what he's doing, and he's going to be, he's okay and he's fine and so forth, and this is the way to be. But on deep down, he knows that he's in a shameful space, and he's going to start to hate himself because he cannot get out of that shame. He doesn't have any way to resolve it. God Almighty put in us the ability, an innate ability, to return from shame to pride, to return from the anti-eternity to the pro-eternity. But when that's blocked by being convinced, no, stay in the anti. And here we'll give you a group of people to hang out with that are all going to support each other in staying in the anti-eternity thinking and actions. Then the person is walking around very tall and proud, but deep inside, he's living a life of shame. And because he's hating himself, he's going to attack himself and be destructive towards himself, and he's going to be destructive and hate others. So whereas, as I said before, the shame is naturally resolved here in this area, it would be naturally resolved by returning to the pro-eternity, which is love. The person is going to feel love. He's going to feel God's love for him. He's going to feel God's forgiveness for him. He's going to have tshuva. Tshuva means returning, and tshuva is refuah. Refuah is healing. So it explains in Torah that refuah, that if, for example, Shabbos is the words for returning, and Shabbos is healing. The returning is healing. So a person is able to be healed just by going back into the pro-eternity. But when he's going to be stuck down here in this shame, then he cannot coexist with the people who are pro-eternity, because their very existence of a person who's pro-eternity is shining a spotlight on his shame. So if a person over here, let's give an example. You have a person, the right, having children is something that's pro-eternity. And a person naturally, as we described, becomes very proud of having children. He's going to call all his friends. He's going to make a big party. He makes a big celebration, and he feels so excited, right? Him and his wife together. If a person, however, falls into into the anti-eternity thinking, and he starts to feel that he shouldn't have so many children, and he starts to use birth control, and he starts to, God forbid, an abortion, and all kinds of different ways that a person is manipulated, he's going to feel shame. Now, the person, what they're going to do is a person will eventually feel, oh my gosh, that doesn't feel so good using all this birth control. And he and his wife are going to say, let's go back, let's have another child. It's naturally going to burst out from inside them, unless if they allow themselves to be fully alive, they will naturally burst out of them that they want to have another child. However, Amalek will say to them, no, don't feel shame over the fact that what the Amalek will do is go and put in the media, people are having so many children, are increasing the world population, and there's not enough space, and there's not enough resources, and so they'll shame the people who are having a lot of children, and they'll try to make the person who is not having children as to feel proud. So, for example, I quoted from an Israeli Knesset member that said the most important thing a couple could do is not bring another child into the world. That's the highest thing a person should feel proud about, is not bring another child into the world. So that's Amalek has infiltrated into that man's thinking, and now he is promoting that. And that's not just, I'm just bringing him as a shocking example, but we know that's all over the place. Now watch what happens. This guy over here is walking around feeling really proud that he is not having a child, but deep down he has shame, because the reality is the shame. The pride is the fake. Now he looks across the street and he sees a man who has 12 children. That man is living life pro-eternity, and he's walking around proud with his 12 children. What is he going to feel towards that man who has the 12 children? He's going to feel hatred for him, because he feels hatred for himself. He's going to feel hatred for that man. So it's not possible. Every moment that man's walking around with 12 children, it's putting straight in his face his own shame of the man who doesn't have any children. So he's going to feel hatred for that person. So it's not possible coexistence between the man who's living down here in the anti. He's walking around all proud saying, oh, I'm okay. But he's going to hate the man who's living over here. The man who's over here, who's doing something anti-eternity, and he feels shame, and he's honest about the shame, and he then does tshuva, he's not going to hate this man over here. He's going to he's going to feel shame. He's going to feel the burning pain of the shame. And then he's going to change his life and become over here. He's going to move over here. But this guy over here is being told he has to stay proud of his anti-eternity. And it's not able to resolve itself. And meanwhile, this fellow over here is walking around with his 12 children. So he is going to hate this guy over here. So therefore, the people who are standing over here with the anti-puruvu, the be fruitful and multiply lifestyles and attitudes and teachings, are going to they have no choice. They're propelled to make a war against the Torah, because the Torah is the one that is promoting this over here. It's acknowledging this pride, and it is letting you know that you will feel shame when you're doing something anti-eternity, and it's telling you that there's a way to return to the pro-eternity way, and God will forgive you for everything you did. So these people over here, they have to make a war against the Torah, and they have to make a war against those that observe the Torah. That is where they have to go. They cannot possibly coexist. So therefore, for a person who's living over here, a Torah observant person is living over here in this space, it's a fatal error for him to say that the anti-puruvu person who's over here with his anti-puruvu, be fruitful and multiply activities over here, because he's over here, he's in a separate place, he's living in a separate village, let's say, that those activities don't affect him, right? He says, listen, I have my 12 children, and there's some guy over here who's not having children. So how does that affect me, right? That's his choice. Because this guy, this anti-puruvu person who's acting in a way of going against his own eternity, he cannot stay over here. He is propelled to fight against over here, because he could be on the other side of the world, but he knows that there's a village on the other side of the world where people have 12 children or 20 children or 8 children or whatever, as many children as they can. It is an affront to his false pride. It's bringing him to an awareness of his own shame, and he can't stand it because he's not given any way out of his shame. Instead of his shame propelling him to go return to God, his shame is being told that he's being told, just fake the pride, and there's no way out of it. He doesn't see how he can, because he can't leave this group over here. He feels he can't. How can he turn around and go over to these people? He's being told that he should be proud of the shame instead of feeling shame of the shameful activities. In which case, he has an easy way back to the way it's supposed to be. So this is therefore what is driving Amalek. This shame. And this shame that Amalek is living over here, and really promoting a dual reality. The shame that Amalek is living is driving Amalek, and Amalek can't have any rest. This is why we have to understand that Amalek cannot just say, oh, you know what? Okay, listen, those people want to have a lot of kids. Those people want to do pro-eternity things. They want to pray and they want to connect to God, and let them stay over there. And these people will stay over here that are going to be, Amalek will stay over there, will have no kids. They'll have no kids, and they'll just, do their fun things that they consider fun, and how they occupy their time. But it's because it's not really fun. It's not really fun at all. So therefore, now we can understand Amalek's drive. Amalek cannot tolerate noble people. Nobility is the concept of Malchus. Malchus is one of the spheros, the attributes of God Almighty, is nobility. And that's implanted in every single human being. But Amalek cannot stand that nobility. What does it look like to be a noble person? So a noble person is honorable in his conduct. He has a clear lineage. If you'll notice that the Torah has many, many, many commandments about not mixing lineages. So we're not supposed to mix the seeds of different plants. We're not supposed to mix the seeds of different animals. Meaning to say that the animals from different species should not mate with each other. Human beings should not mate with animals. Men should not mate with men, and people should not have intimate relations with their close relatives and with people who are married to other people. There's a whole concept of creating a clear lineage because that's nobility. It's clarity and nobility. And a noble person also lives without shame. He's going in the straight path. He is staying straight, connected to what's innately in him and what is honorable and what's noble. So Amalek cannot tolerate nobility. And you see that one of the first things, besides after fighting against God, if you look at the hierarchy, what does Amalek want to do? Makes war against God, makes war against the kingships. You see Amalek work through the communists to topple every single royalty in Europe and in Russia and in every country, right? Because even though those people were not necessarily, those kings were not necessarily personally living up to the title of nobility that they had, but still even having the title of nobility represents something that man could aspire to. So they had to destroy the concept of the nobility. One of the other things they want to fight against is the family. They want to destroy the family. The family is the nobility of a man and a woman coming together and saying they're closing out the rest of the world. They're not going to let the rest of the world have any influence on them. And they are going to focus their energies, their creative and eternal energies, on each other and bringing up their family in a clear, pure lineage. That's something Amalek fights against. So that's why the war against the family, and the war to get the women out of the houses to go, instead of raising their kids, to go to work, and to get people to have smaller families and to follow their desires without getting married and do things that won't lead to bringing children into the world. So this is now we can understand that we cannot say, oh, we're over here and whatever they do is not relevant. No, they're not resting to try to make war against the people who are living according to God's eternity. And we have to realize that we can't rest. That's why the battle with Amalek is from generation to generation. There's no rest of it. And that's why it says in the Haggadah on Passover that this is what has stood for us in all the generations, that the promise that God is taking care of us, because in every generation they rise against the Jewish people to eliminate the Jewish people. And it's only God Almighty who saves us from the hands of those to seek to eliminate the Jewish people. So Amalek in every generation is coming out with a plan. How could their confusion is not only are they confused about that they have this false idea that they can make war against God, and they refuse to allow their shame to be resolved in a innate way, and they try to convince everyone to come down into this quadrant over here, but they must, by definition, work to eliminate over here. They must eliminate the pro-eternity thinking and the pro-eternity people, because that's they cannot exist with people like that. So therefore, we have to know that God Almighty is saving us in every generation from this warfare, and at the same time, we have to obligation to go out and proclaim to the world, no, don't fall for this trap over here. This is falsehood. And our lives depend on it. We cannot just say, oh, well, I'm just going to stay here in my yeshiva. I'm just going to stay here in my space. And what they're doing is, it's terrible what they're doing. It's terrible what they do over there. I don't like what's on the street. They're looking around for anybody who's over here. They're not going to just stay out there in their particular neighborhoods. When I say neighborhoods, I mean whether it's neighborhoods in their thinking or their social circles or their actual physical neighborhoods. Okay, so now, what is this shame about? The shame is a feeling of insecurity. It comes from an insecure thought, because when a person's thought, speech, why is a person feeling shame down here? When a person is separating themselves from eternity, which is God Almighty, when their thought, speech, and action is separated from eternity, from God, then a person is going to naturally, automatically feel insecure. In fact, it is the feeling of separation from God Almighty that leads a person to that insecure thought, that leads a person to do actions that are against their eternity. It says in Proverbs, it says, Taivas yivakesh nifrad. Desires are sought by a person who is separate. When a person feels separated from God Almighty, that's when he's looking to fulfill desires in the world that are not related to his pro-eternity, but rather moving into things that work against his own physical and spiritual and eternity. So the insecure thought leads a person to take actions that are against his eternity. And then when he does something or says or thinks, says or does something that's against his eternity, he's going to have more insecure thoughts, because now he's going to say, before he was feeling insecure that he's separated from God. So then he went and did something to try to take care of that feeling. Now he's like, oh my gosh, now he really is separated from God. Now he's feeling even more insecure. So then that's what leads to, that's what's happening. Now, in Gan Eden, in the Garden of Eden, this is what happened with eating the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Because until then, God Almighty was taking care of everything for Adam and Eve. They had no insecure thoughts. There was nothing to be insecure about. As soon as Eve ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, she was fascinated by the idea that she could have things to worry about. Well, what might happen if a meteor strikes the earth? What might happen if the sun goes out? What might happen if there's no food tomorrow? What happens if the oxygen runs out? Those were all thoughts that didn't enter their minds when they were before the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's not that the knowledge of good and evil in the sense of evil things as in bad. It's the insecure thoughts, the possibilities of what could go wrong. It's only once a person starts thinking of what could go wrong that they start to do things that we call evil, because now it's like, oh my gosh, what happens if there's not enough food tomorrow? Someone says to themselves, it might not be food tomorrow. Got to steal the other guy's food because he has too much, or forget what he needs. This person wants to have enough for himself. All that comes from the insecure thinking. So that's what happened in the Garden of Eden. The fascinating thing is, if you look in Rashi, in explaining the simple meaning of the verses, it says after that Eve ate from the apple. It wasn't an apple, but it was the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It says that she wanted immediately to give her husband to eat from the tree. Why was she so compelled that Adam should eat it also? Because Rashi explains that as soon as she ate from this fruit and she now saw possibilities of what could go wrong to worry about, and the possibility of feeling disconnected from God Almighty, she suddenly realized that she might die and Adam would be left as a widower, and he would marry another woman. And that was a terrifying thought for her. So then she realized that the only way out of the situation was to go ahead and get him to eat the fruit so that he should die with her. That way he wouldn't marry another woman. Now think about how quickly she went off track in her thinking, because there wasn't even another woman in existence. It was just her and her husband. There was no reason to think they were going to die. And there was no reason to think that there was going to be another woman for her husband to marry. Yet, as soon as she was starting to allow her mind to think about all the worrisome possibilities and go into that insecure thought, then all of a sudden she's like, now she's doing something that was bad. She was now trying to trap her husband in the same situation. So that's what happens when we have insecure thinking. And that's where the insecure thought that we're separated from God leads us to do something that's against our eternity. Then we feel shame, and we could start to feel even more distant. And then we could, God forbid, feel there's no way back. And that's what Amalek starts to prey on over here, is to say, listen, instead of feeling shame and feeling separated from God, why don't you just feel good about what you're doing? Just focus on feeling good instead of trying to figure out how to get back to the right track. Just keep doing again and again what it is that's making you feel shameful and insecure. And if you keep doing it, you won't have to worry anymore about trying to get back, because you could just stay over here and try to pump yourself up by thinking that you don't need to change what you're doing. So the one thing we have to tell people, no, once again, it's very, very easy to leave as soon as you have an insecure thought. Even if person went into the anti-eternity actions, it's very easy to leave the insecure thought and to go to a secure thought, because God is constantly putting secure thoughts into our head. If we would just listen to them, that's the voice of God speaking to us. So that secure thought is bringing us to teshuva, to returning to God Almighty, and to joy. Because up here in the eternity, when a person is living according to their pro-eternity, they're automatically going to feel happy, proud. When they're in anti-eternity thinking, speech, or action, they're going to be feeling depressed. They're going to be feeling down. They're going to be feeling powerless. They're going to be feeling hopeless. So as a person moves, it can move immediately from here to back into here just by feeling joy. In fact, the Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, great Hasidic Rebbe, one of the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, said that if a person, God forbid, does a sin, then immediately he should rejoice. So you're going to say, one second, hold on a second. He just did a sin. He's going to be happy? And he says, yes, because the whole point of getting a person into doing something that was against his eternity, to doing a sin against God, was to get him into this shameful feeling, and then to try to get him to go deeper and deeper in his shameful feeling. So he did one sin, and he'll do another sin. The more he spends time down here, it just goes downhill, downhill. So he says, no, turn it around immediately. Forget what you did. Be happy. Go back right here instantly. You can't even figure out, you don't think about it anymore. Don't even think that you did it anymore. Just go straight back into the joy. And that's going to take you instantly back into the eternity, which is God Almighty is the source of joy. So that's the way we're supposed to go. We're supposed to be moving directly. So this is, we're going to see as we go through, we're going to start learning the concepts of tshuva, of returning to God. So the message of the Torah for all of humanity is the ease of doing tshuva, the ease of returning to God Almighty. It's so simple. It's so simple. It's instantaneous. A person's able to change direction. It's not about correcting all their actions and correcting all their thoughts and correcting all their speech and being perfect. It's about turning around the direction from going downhill here to going uphill into here. That's the change in direction. But if a person, on the other hand, keeps repeating the insecure thought, keeps repeating the insecure speech, or keeps repeating the insecure action, that's going to keep a person imprisoned here in the shame. If every time a person says, you know, I really should stop doing this, the way I'm conducting myself, getting angry, taking some money that's not entitled to, taking food they're not entitled to, pushing someone out of the way, doing things that are not proper, worshiping idols, which could mean putting someone else in power over them, like the government or their boss or whatever it is, or another human being. Whatever it is that all the thoughts, the speech and action that is making a person feel shame, repeating these insecure thoughts is just going to keep the person imprisoned here in the shame. We're like pushing ourselves into that space. And that's why Amalek wants people to join it. Amalek is living in shame. Amalek's existence is a shameful existence because it doesn't see the divine providence in its creation, that it was created from a doubly inappropriate relationship. The Amalek when he was born. So he's feeling shame, and he wants people to stay down here and then move over here because he wants people to join it in his shame. So therefore, that's why Amalek is constantly promoting and missionizing thoughts, speech, and action that keep a person in shame. That's why Amalek is sitting 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day, Amalek is developing. If you look at, for example, pornography that's being created it's all being created by Amalek. I mean, there's whole computer centers of people creating this stuff, and what they do is they take a person. Okay, this is intriguing. They don't stop there. They don't say, oh, look at this pretty flower, and then just stop there. The goal is to take a person feels a little bit uncomfortable, not so happy about it, but they don't say, okay, that's enough for today. that's enough. You went into this little off track a little bit. Okay, they take a person to the next level and the next level down and down and down and down and down. If a person clicks, it goes lower and lower and more against eternity. It goes deeper and deeper. A person is feeling greater and greater shame. That's where Amalek is. It's all by design, meaning to say if it's calculated. It's actually physically created in computer centers. That they're and in studios, they're actually creating this material to drag a person, to capture a person's, they should look at it for an instant. And then instead of letting him go, it's going to be taking him down, God forbid. So that's the promoting and missionizing, and the same with the romanticizing of it. So they'll say, okay, here's something that's anti-eternity, not having children, getting involved in activities that don't bring children into the world. So they start to make it look romantic. And look, they promote it and they missionize it to the children and to the teenagers and to the adults even to married people. They're constantly missionizing it to get people to go into those thoughts, speech, and actions that are going to keep a person in shame and stay there. And then they put on this outer veneer of pride and that it's a good life and it's fun and it's romantic and all these kind of things to keep people moving out from here down into here and then across to here. So in the short term, what the trick that they play on people in the short term, it does feel good in the sense that they don't take people and say, here, take the first thing I don't say to the person is go and walk on glass. They get a person into something that feels in the moment, it feels good, and then the person starts to and they advertise the benefits of it. Oh, it's going to be like this and it's going to be like that, and you see all the good things. But what they don't tell a person is that it's disconnecting them from their eternity. So they keep luring a person with the momentary, in the moment advantages, the in the moment experience. And the experience the person is going to have, and say, okay, go for that, and then the person, and then to keep promoting that. Now you're going to say to me, what's the difference between this and the actual, the desires that a person could have for something that's feels good in the moment? Because when a person is on their own, so to speak, and they just get caught up in the thought, speech, or action, then they're going to automatically feel shame, and they're going to be propelled back in the direction of the pro-eternity. If it's just a person going off track on their own, oh, that looks interesting. Okay, I'd like to have that food I'm not supposed to eat. Well, they're going to go back over here. But when a person is being pushed in this direction, then what they're being exposed to is being calculated. So that they're showing in the kids' TV shows, they're showing in the kids' movies, they're showing in the kids' books, they're showing stuff that are pushing a person into anti-eternity and then trying to reframe it as pride. Oh, you should be so proud. Yet person God should be so proud they're not having children. Then that is calculated. It's not just a temporary stumbling that any person could do anytime, but it's rather it's being promoted to a person as a way to get him into this and then to keep him there. So they're disguising that's disconnecting a person from their eternity. So everything this we're saying over here is just in the simple meaning of the Torah. We could see the realm of what's called pshat. This is just simplicity. The people, we talk about the hidden aspects of the Torah and the Kabbalah and so forth. We're not even discussing any of that. Right now, we're just discussing the simple facts of life as God Almighty has created us. The simple way that we are created to work, that we naturally feel eternity, we feel drawn to eternity. And now we can understand what King David says in Psalms, that Rashayim af b'chayehim, it says, Lo hamesim liyahalel, it says the wicked will, the dead will not praise you. King David says in Psalms, the dead will not praise you. So the obvious question you have to ask is, one second, we know that the dead are dead. They don't have the capability to speak. So what kind of profound statement is it to say that the dead are not going to praise you, God? And the answer is because when it says the dead is referring to the wicked. So the expression is Rishayim af b'chayehem nikraim meisim, that the wicked people, even in their lifetime, are called dead, because when it's talking about the wicked, it's talking about the people that are going not just in a momentary lapse, but they're driving over into this place over here, that they're making a lifestyle of their wickedness. Then they're not praising God anymore. They stop praising God because they are now making a war against God when they get down over here. They are, whereas a person who's alive, meaning to say they're either right now in the pro-eternity thought, speech, and action, they're obviously alive, they're praising God in every breath. Here, the person falls down here, he's going to be propelled back into here naturally. He's going to be praising God. He's going to be thanking God for the opportunity to return. But the wicked are not able to praise God. This is when they are intentionally being propelled down into fighting against him. So one thing we have to understand over here, we don't have the time to go into in great detail, but that even though we're talking about Amalek, the Rabbi Shab is a mimer when he says, Kate Sam Lacheshech, Rishis Goyim Amalek, Kate Sam Lacheshech, that Amalek is the head of the nations, meaning the head of the nations that fight against God, but God places an end to this darkness. That this struggle over here, that Amalek is trying to draw mankind off track, is not a permanent state of affairs, and that's what we're praying for. That's what we're praying for, that we should have Mashiach come, and that's this Amalek will be put, an end will be put to Amalek, freeing humanity from this terror of being pushed into making anti-eternity as a lifestyle, and anti-eternity is being made reversed, everything being inverted. So that is what we'll want to that is what I wanted to bring up over here. Okay, any questions? Okay, so now we have in context what's really going on over here. When in the whole, we are living human beings. Each human being is a living human being and is facing this this experience in every instant. We have a choice in every thought, speech, and action that we have. We have a choice to go with the eternity, go with God Almighty, to go with the secure thought, or God forbid, to go with the insecure thought, and where that could take us, God forbid. So we want to keep going back to the secure thought. In fact, we don't want to give any credence to the insecure thought, because the insecure thought doesn't matter what the content is. Person is going to say, oh, this insecure thought, it's a real thought. Person says he's too short. The fact of the matter is, he's let's say he's 5 foot, whatever it is, he considers too short. So he says, 1 second, what do you mean that I shouldn't be thinking of the insecure thought? The fact of the matter, he really is that height, or he's too tall. He feels he's too tall. So the fact is, on the measuring scale, we're not trying to say that he's not that height, but what he has to realize is that the content is not what's really important. It's that insecurity, that thinking that he's disconnected from God, that's the real issue. The content that we attach to it later on, person's feeling disconnected from God Almighty, and he says, oh, it's because of his height. And you see the tape measure, he has a tape measure to prove it. The number's too low or the number's too high. That's just all his thinking. The reality is that he has to come back to the reality that he cannot possibly be connected, that cannot possibly be disconnected from God Almighty. That's the secure thought. And if a person stays in that secure thought, which leads to a secure feeling, which is the menuchas hanefesh, is the tranquility of the soul, then a person could stay in that tranquility of the soul. When a person's in the tranquility of the soul, then everything just flows. All his thoughts are in line with that. His speeches, he speaks to his family that way. He speaks to his people around him that way. He speaks to the rest of the world that way. He speaks from that place of tranquility of the soul, from that place of secure thought. And that's where each one of us is supposed to be and meant to be. And what the Rambam is bringing out over here, which Rabbi Steif is quoting, is that is going to give a person the eternity in this physical world through having children and eternity in the world to come through his soul. Now we continue over here in the square brackets. This Ken Hu Loshen Rambam, Sof Perak Ches Malachim Halach Yud. This is the language of the Rambam in the end of the 8th chapter of the Laws of Kings in the 10th halacha, the 10th law. The Kasav Mishnah, Sherebeno Amar Ken Musvar Nadashe. And the Kasav Mishnah says that the Rambam is writing this point that that the person who is not doing it, he's just doing it because, the Kasav Mishnah writes that a person is just doing it because it makes sense, that he doesn't have a, he is not called Chassidic Umas Eilam, he's not called a wise person, that the Rambam's writing that based on his own thinking. And it's just, that's his own thinking. I found this in the Midrash. I found it in a book called Toldus Adam. I'm not sure if this is I think it's referring to, just as Reish Yud. It's Rabbi Yossi. Oh, yes. Rabbi Yossi says, Heineke Rabbi Yeshua, the Sfirle can be 100. Okay, so it could be Rabbi Yeshua. I'm not sure which. It just says Reish Yud, which stands for Rabbi, and then Yud. I'm not sure which. Doesn't say his whole name. So Chassidim Maseilim, we know that they have a portion of the world to come. Chachmei, the wise ones, like smart men, who don't qualify to be Chassidim Maseilim because they're not accepting it because God said it on Mount Sinai. It's not explained to us. Lo nisparish lanu. It's not told us what the answer is for their spiritual future. Eza, and then it continues. Eza Chassidim Umas Eilam, who are considered the Chassidim Umas Eilam on the top of the page over here. We're in 300 Shin Gimel 303. Zeh hamakabel alav Sheva Mitzos Bnai Noach ksuvim b'Torah. This is he who accepts upon themselves the 7 laws because they are written in the Torah. The wise of the nations of the world are those that do them because it makes sense. Shikul adas means thinking things through and weighing and weighing the pros and cons and coming to the conclusion that it makes sense to do these laws. Ad Kamashena, this is the end of what the quote is. The Nira Shazet Hamokal Divrei Rambam. Looks like this is the source for the words of the Rambam that the wise people don't have a portion in the world to come, only the Chassidic Umas Eilam. The Kain Kasuv, the Sefer Mikra the Radiki. This other book he found says that yes, this is indeed the source for the Rambam. According to this, we need to investigate further. Why did the Rambam write that they're not from the wise people? If we say that the wise people are the ones that take it on because it makes sense, then why does he then go on and say they're not even wise? The Midrash Hanizker Kasav She'eno Mechasidehem. It says in the Midrash, it says that it's written that they're not from the pious ones. They're from the wise ones. Maybe it should be written in the Rambam, these people who do it because it makes sense, they are not from the Chassidim, from the pious ones, but they are from the wise ones. Meaning to say, instead of it reading, should it say they are? It's trying to suggest maybe a correction in the wording of the Rambam. Instead of saying they're not from the pious ones and they're not from the wise ones, it should say they're not from the pious ones, but rather they're from the wise ones. So over here in the footnotes, that a whole discussion of this about that there's another there's a different other people who come to the same suggestion possibly, and we've discussed this before, that in what way could we understand? We could say, okay, that's one possibility. Maybe it needs a correction in the writing that they're not pious, but they are wise. But why does it make would it fit for the Rambam to actually intentionally write they're not only not from the pious, they're not from the wise? Because a person who thinks that they could just do these commandments and civilization will survive if it's merely done because of the logic, he's not a very wise person. Meaning to say he's making a wise decision today to do things like not kill people. But that's not true wisdom, because a true wise person knows that anything's based on human logic has no chance of surviving, because human logic will take us anywhere. And that's what the Lubavitcher Rebbe says is the cause of the Holocaust, because Germany took God out of the schools in the late 1800s and then early parts of the 1900s, and God was taken out. So then human logic was able to prove everything. Everything that Nazis did was logical. So therefore, a person who is going to say, well, they're not going to do it because God said it, they're just going to do it because it makes sense, will superficially look wise for the moment, but in the long run, it's definitely not wisdom. It's even in the short run, it's not wisdom, because a wise person knows, a truly wise person knows that it has to be, in order for mankind to live according to his divine image, he has to know it's coming from God Almighty. Yud, 10th halacha, 10th paragraph, Rabbi Steif. Sheva Mitzos Bnai Noach. A non-Jew who transgresses one of these 7 commandments, Nerag b'Steif, he is executed with this by the sword. And this is according to he's quoting from Sanhedrin, tractate Sanhedrin 56, verse side. Now, and we're going to see here the discussion is for a Jew also. A Jew is also executed. What's going to see is that there's some differences in the method of execution. There's 4 basic methods of execution that a human court is empowered with, and all but for a few exceptions, the method of execution for a non-Jew who transgresses the 7 commandments is by the sword. But meaning like the guillotine could be an example of sword. Kaimalan shekol misa hamura b'nei Noach ena ela b'sayif, and we've been taught that all the forms of execution that are said about a b'nei Noach is only by the sword. V'chein lashon Rambam, and this too is the language of the Rambam in the Laws of Kings, the 9th chapter, the 14th halacha. Uben Noach she'avra a'achas mezayim mitzvos elo yihareg b'sayif. A non-Jew, a son of Noach, that transgresses one of the 7 mitzvahs is executed by the sword. This is why in the Torah, all the residents of Shechem were obligated in being executed. So that's in Bereshis. Could you see in Bereshis in Perek Lamed Daled Chof Hey? What happened over there is Shari Shechem Gazel as Dina. Shechem abducted and raped Dina. Dina was a daughter of Yaakov, of Jacob, and she was raped. And then the Heim Ro'u, meaning his neighbors, the other residents of his city, they saw what he did, v'yedu, and they knew about it, v'lo danuhu, and they didn't bring him to judgment. The proper thing they should have done is they should have seen that he took a woman, he raped this woman, and then they should have arrested him, and they should have put him on trial, and they should have, if he was guilty, they should have executed him. But they didn't do that. Bnei Noach mitzuvim al dinim, and Bnei Noach are commanded on the 7th of the commandments. We've already discussed whether it's the 7th or the 1st. According to the Gemara, it's actually the 1st of the commandments. The commandment of setting up courts of justice and teaching the laws of the Sheva Mitzos Bnai Noach is something that applies to every single person. It's an individual responsibility. It's not a government responsibility. Like we think, oh, well, if there's a court today, if there's a court in the city or the county or the province or state we live in, that's the government's responsibility. No, it's not. According to the Sheva Mitzvos, it's each individual's responsibility. And it's each individual's responsibility that the law should be carried out correctly. So every human being is commanded with that. So what happened is they knew about it, the crime that he committed, that he went against the Sheva Mitzos by kidnapping and raping her. They knew that he did it, and they did not bring him to justice. So therefore, the entire city was violating the Sheva Mitzos Bnai Noach. That's why it was permissible for Shimon and Levi, two of the sons of Jacob, to go ahead and kill all the people in that city. If you recall this book of Genesis, they made a deal that everyone was going to circumcise themselves, and Jacob was, going along with this idea of they're going to make this kind of treaty between them, and then Shimon and Levi took matters into their own hand, and they went and killed everybody. So the question is, how could they have killed everybody? All these people, weren't they innocent? There was only one person that did any raping. Everyone else was a bystander. So the fact of the matter is that you cannot be an innocent bystander in an act of going against the 7 laws of Noah, because you're not innocent if you don't bring the person to justice, and that's an obligation of every individual. Can't say, oh, well, the police didn't arrest him and the court didn't put him on trial, or the judges didn't find him guilty even though he was guilty. Can't say, well, that's not my problem. It is a problem because every individual has the obligation to fulfill this commandment to bring justice and to execute justice. And then in the square brackets, he brings a point over here, just to some differentiations of the different forms of execution. On the ayin Rambam, you should see in the Rambam, in the halachas of Malachim, the laws of kings, the 10th chapter, and the 5th halacha, v'chein hu b'Sanhedrin and Zayin Amud Beis, and also in the tractate Sanhedrin, in the second side of the 57th page, Shekasav, that he wrote, Ben Noach sheba al naira meusa liyisrael yisakel, Ben Noach, a son of Noach, non-Jew, that has relations with a Jewish girl that's engaged to a Jewish person, then his form of execution is by stoning. And if he has relations with her after she already went through the marriage ceremony, then it's through strangulation. And we will explain this later on when we get to the discussion of the forbidden relations in chapter, paragraph 62. So he's bringing that for later. So basically, this paragraph is discussing the form of how is justice executed on a person who transgresses the 7 commandments. Next week, God willing, we'll start to discuss what happens if a person makes a mistake. That's going to be paragraph 11. Okay, questions, please.
So the crime of the rest of the village was that they became partners in crime with the rapist, and because it's the obligation to open just courts of justice, and they transgressed by looking away and letting it happen and not bringing him to justice. And so the punishment is the same as for him.
Correct, because the punishment is the same as for him because they did not enforce judgment. And if a person allows the world to be destroyed, God's whole creation is based on justice. Mm-hmm. That's the core, that things should be carried. There should be a system of justice, and there's a reward and punishment, and the person is going to transgress against God's commandments is going to be punished, and there has to be a proper, proper system of justice where a person is going to have witnesses, and it's going to be brought up in charges, and judges will consider whether or not he actually meets the conditions for the punishment, or maybe he's innocent. Mm-hmm. So that's a process. Everyone has a responsibility to get to the bottom of that. Yes, so you're absolutely right. Mm-hmm. So it's not so much that I don't know if you're using the term they became partners in his crime. I don't know that they became partners in his crime of rape so much as they were failing to fulfill their obligation to set up courts of justice. Now, from a more expansive perspective, well, yes, if a person is not going to set up courts of justice, then he is really actively, like you're using the terminology that you're saying, becoming partners, because he's now saying, you know what, that's okay. He's saying this is going to go unpunished, it's not going to be prosecuted, and therefore it's like a ratification of the violation of the other 6 commandments. God forbid.
And if I understand correctly, so the punishment for Bnei Noach is mostly the so to say mildest form of them all, because of all the 4 types of execution. The sword is the most humane, something like that, or the quickest and the most
Right.
painless.
Right.
Okay.
Good point. Well, let's just avoid it completely. do the right thing, and then we don't have to worry about any sort of punishment. God willing. Any other questions? Okay. Wonderful. It's great to see you all. And we'll look forward to seeing next week. Please send any questions and think of questions for next week. And we'll continue going into learning what God's will for all of us is. God willing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
God bless you all. You're welcome. Thank you.
Bye.